4 terror attacks in 4 days, all of them concentrated in the same region of Jammu, well below the Pir Panjal range. What's the message the terrorists and, more importantly, their handlers are trying to send? And how should India retaliate? Is it time for another Balakot or Uri-style cross-border attack? And if not yet, what is the threshold when India says enough is enough and that we need to go into Pakistan? Joining us now is a fabulous panel of experts cutting across different spheres of national security. Allow me to introduce to you Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, former General Officer Commanding of 15 Corps. We have with us Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. With us is SP Vaid, former Director General of the Jammu and Kashmir Police. Dr. Tara Kartha is the Terrorism and Security Expert. She's been Director at the National Security Council Secretariat. With me in the studio, my colleague and India Today Strategic Affairs Expert, Gaurav Sawant, and our reporter from Jammu, Sunil G. Bhatt. I want to go across to General Syed Ata Hasnain first. General Hasnain, if we were to join the dots of these 4 terror attacks, I happened to be at Rashtrapati Bhavan when news came in of this terror attack at Reasi. It caught everyone off guard, and there's a lot of chatter amongst the dignitaries who were gathered there. This wasn't happenstance. It's clearly planned to coincide with Prime Minister Modi's swearing in. What's the message you think terrorists and their handlers are trying to send?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rahul, for inviting me for this very important program. The event that you just spoke of was the cause itself. In the sense, it had an immense importance about it. It was conveying a message to the world. India, successful democracy, third coming of Prime Minister Modi, the NDA government, as compared to what happened on the other side in Pakistan, where it took 2 months to form a government, weak government, the state of the economy in India, lots of things here were being observed by the world. While openly most people may not have assessed it, but it's obvious that the security forces, security agencies would have anticipated this. And I recall, take your mind back to 24 years ago when Chittu Singhpura happened. It happened exactly one night before the morning on which Bill Clinton was to speak in the Indian Parliament, a message to say the American president may be here, but we are still in control from Pakistan's deep state. That's exactly what was happening here, because Pakistan is not controlled by a monolith. It is controlled by different layers. One or a combination of those layers decided that they must convey a message, a strategic message to the world, that while India speaks about all its success and its achievements, while Prime Minister Modi and the NDA speak about their achievements, here they haven't got Jammu and Kashmir under control. That was the clear message that they wanted to convey. It was done deliberately. The area was selected. That area in particular, I'm sure we will discuss it. Why that area? Obviously, Kashmir is difficult to go today. You can have small operations here and there, but the combined effect of that will still not be impacted.
Okay.
In this area, you will still feel the impact of it, and we will describe it as we go along in this program.
Sushant Sareen, your reading, if you join these dots, what's the message you think our viewers should know the terrorists and their handlers in Pakistan are trying to send?
So, Rahul, quite clearly, the fact of the matter remains that while we know that Pakistan is down and out and, we know all the problems they are suffering, but they're not ready to throw in the towel. And there are enough statements coming out of the GHQ, out of the Foreign Office in Pakistan, which should have told us that, look, there is no appetite for any kind of a compromise deal, what have you, on this issue. They're lying low because at the time of the elections, they did not want to, bowl another sixer for Mr. Modi, like they did in 2019. So they were trying to avoid it, but they were itching to do something. Number one. So quite clearly that itch is now taken the better of them and they're going to go ahead and do it. Secondly, look, let's face it, the center of gravity of terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir has moved to this region over the last at least 3 years, if not longer. Partly because of what General Hasnain is saying. The space for them to operate in Kashmir Valley has got rather constricted. So a lot of them have moved into the Jammu region. And we should have woken up to this many months back, many years back, actually. Also because the kind of political noises that you were hearing from this region were not exactly something that we should have been sanguine about. Partly because in that entire Jammu versus Kashmir, tussle, this was a region which was completely being ignored, completely neglected. And clearly there was something bubbling out there which many people seem to have missed out on. Number three, and very importantly, these are not just one or two groups now. The spate of incidents that have taken place over the last 4 days, I don't think anybody can tell us that it's the same bunch of people who are going from one place to another. They are not Batman, Superman. So obviously these guys are spread out in small groups, but clearly the kind of operations they have carried out over the last 2-3 years are very different from the kind of silly target killings which these PAFF kind of characters have carried out. These are guys who seem to be highly trained. They've carried out ambushes of military convoys, caused any number of casualties. So I think we should have woken up to this, and then because we have pulled out, because of our own hubris, because that Jammu everything is safe and sound, we seem to have left certain security gaps which we will now need to fill up.
Let Gaurav explain those, because we've moved a division worth of strength from the Jammu region to the line of actual control, because that's where we thought the real threat was, with the People's Liberation Army on the other side, and therefore the terrorists seem to be exploiting these gaps in our security grid south of the Pir Panjal.
Rahul, you're absolutely right. So what's happening in this region is there are critical gaps in intelligence, there are critical gaps in operations, and there are physical gaps which to an extent have been filled, but perhaps not as strongly as should have. You're absolutely right. When uniform force was removed from an area which was declared terror-free, south of Pir Panjal was declared terror-free, and with a lot of pomp and show that we've defeated terror. While that may have been true tactically, strategically, this is the preferred route for infiltration for a very long time. Pakistan has been spreading terror in our country from 1947, when Jinnah sent in raiders, in October 1947. So you may have won in a couple of years, but when you remove a division strength and put them at the LAC, they cannot be filled, those gaps cannot be filled by central armed police forces, and they cannot operate with the same zeal, enthusiasm, command and control like the army, and especially in the higher reaches. So what terrorists did, and I covered Operation Sarfinash in 2003, what terrorists do is that they have their bases on the higher reaches and they come down, carry out a terror strike,
but
and
from
go back.
what I recall, those were dozens of terrorists. Do you see dozens of terrorists here in the higher reaches, or are they much smaller groups like Sushant seems to be suggesting?
So there are multiple groups. They may have a bigger base. The fact that they're well trained, they've targeted 9 para SF, one of our best trained and operationally most solid commandos. They've killed them in an ambush. They've targeted convoys on the road. They've filmed it, the way Islamic State terrorists do. That just goes on to show. So our human intelligence, that's been found wanting, because these terrorists cannot remain in those dhokes or higher reaches unless they have local support of Gujjars, Bakarwals or whoever else in that region. So our human intelligences are found wanting. Our operations we are found wanting. Perhaps somewhere we are not following the kind of standard operating procedures that you need to. If a single truck is going and 5 terrorists ambush that truck and kill everyone and go away with their weapons, that's a major problem. And they're infiltrating across the international border. So which means the BSF has been found wanting, as ADGP Jammu said. If they're coming in from the Samba threat, and Rahul, if I may, that Samba Hiranagar international border, if I may, the biggest threat now is that in case the Amarnath Yatra is targeted, then this will flare up and terrorism will return to the valley, and that's the biggest threat that India faces.
No, absolutely. Very, very major concerns around what is at play. I want to go across to Dr. Tara Kartha on what do you think is at play, because the Amarnath Yatra is, as Gaurav mentions, around the corner. We have a situation where multiple attacks are taking place, and if it happens the first time, you can say, okay, we were found wanting, but if these single trucks keep getting ambushed, as has now happened multiple times, something clearly, even at our end, before we discuss what to do with Pakistan, even at our end, seems to be lacking.
I wouldn't go 100% with what he said earlier. See, the IB, like you said correctly, the BSF thing in IB is a different force. There is a problem there. There has been a problem there earlier also. It's not the first time that infiltration has occurred from that side. That was not an encounter. That was an infiltration, or rather, that was not a terror attack. It was an infiltration which was foiled, right? The major attack is the reasi one. And that is, like we said, is what is worrying us, because, I should tell you something, there would have been a clear idea that there's going to be a rise in terrorist attacks the moment the assembly elections were announced. I mean, there was no question. So everybody would have been on board to let's keep our ears open. So, see, it's easy to say, intelligence failure. You cannot ever, in any country, have 100% intelligence. It's just not possible. So, having said that, yes, there is always room to get better stuff going. The problem here, in terms of operations, is that we no longer have that, convenient thing of tapping these phones, understanding which tower the, communications are coming from. Earlier, it was so simple. You knew X tower is a JEM tower, it's a JEM group, you listen to the chatter, 5-6 log hai. Now it's all silent because they're using a different technology. So it doesn't go to a tower.
What technology do you think these terrorists use at this moment?
This is called, it's a technology which lets your mobile phone into a wireless, bypasses that control tower entirely, and then goes into the dark web. You cannot catch these guys in terms of what they're doing now. That is the problem. So, however, we can't just say, okay, we can't do it and then just sit quiet. I understand from reports in Kathua that there was human. That's how many of these, they barged into a house, that's a different issue. In where the encounters going on right now, even as we speak, there has been human. There is a problem, but human is still very much there. And the reason, why is it that the PPR is now more active? This side of the PPR, because the intelligence grade in Kashmir was fantastic, which I'm sure Gaurav will agree with me. It was a fantastic intelligence grade. Plus, you see the areas opposite it. Try getting, through Gilgit-Baltistan is entirely hostile to Pakistan. Pure Azad Kashmir is in complete protest. Down below is the areas where they can infiltrate. I am assuming that is a big issue here. And also, like we said, getting an intelligence grade in this kind of topography, which Gaurav is very familiar with, forests, tunnels, it's a massive exercise.